Okay.
Okay, we are back online, and I'm just going to talk here for a couple minutes so you all can let me know if it's working. We've had to change up our setup a little bit to work around some problems we've had. So please let me know what the quality of the audio is now. It's not going to be the same quality that you're probably used to, but what I want to know is, are you getting steady, direct audio, or is it still going in and out and doing what it was doing previously? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from Kay. Yeah? Okay, so do you want to go back and do the song again, or no? Just begin. Let's go. All right, so let's all take a collective deep breath because we're all a little rattled. And as I reminded everyone before we began, we are a small church. We do not have a big audio-visual tech team doing all this. This is all of us working as volunteers. We do the very best we can, and it's not perfect. And we are not about being perfect, and it's not important that it be perfect. What's important is that we connect with you and we're able to share this time together. So another deep breath in. All right. So good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome once again to our online virtual Unity of Monterey Bay community. Let us once again breathe into this now moment, affirming our oneness with all beings around the world. And this morning, as I know we are all sort of struggling to make sense of the worldly chaos that's swirling around us, let us remember, this can help us to pause, take that breath and go within, to ground ourselves in the truth of our being, and to remember that life happens from the inside out. So this calls us to be and express love, peace, and justice in each and every moment. Okay, are we still good? Are we still getting, I'm seeing everyone. Okay, we're still good. If we're not good, please let us know immediately. If not, we're just going to continue assuming that you're hearing all right. I'm Reverend Michelle DeLynch, and I'm here this morning with our amazing, awesome, intrepid Essential Sunday Service team, our music director Denise Headland, John Callan on drums and vocals and soundboard, Robin Falkenberg doing the platform, Martha Price doing an amazing job on the live streaming with her intrepid partner Huckleberry always standing by and helping. Who else we got? I think that covers it. And of course we have our guest speaker this morning, Holly Steele, also with us. So we give thanks for this awesome team that comes together every Sunday to bring you this service. A reminder to our guests that while you are here, we do require that everyone wear masks throughout the service, especially when up and moving about, except of course those of us on the platform or who are performing, and we are also distancing. And a reminder that the safest thing for you to do is hum behind your mask. Let us begin by affirming our Unity of Monterey Bay's sacred mission as an inclusive spiritual community committed to co-creating an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and compassionate human presence on this planet. In celebrating our oneness, we here at Unity of Monterey Bay honor the God of each of our understanding. And we also affirm the innate good and that divine essence within each and every individual. So will you please join me now in our statement of faith? There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, expressing as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. And so it is. Everything still okay?
Martha, now she says, okay, much better.
Okay.
Okay.
Vicky.
All right, good. Okay, so dropping now even a little bit more into this sacred space, let's breathe again into this present moment and open with a moment of prayer. As always, we call on the God of each of our understanding. We allow ourselves this morning to just come into this present moment and bring our bodies and our minds to rest here in this time and place. We allow ourselves to drop into our heart space, that place where we know the presence of God, where we know we are safe, we are loved, we are connected, where we know a peace that surpasses all human understanding. And as we prepare for this next hour, we set an intention for it to be a time of deep rest for us, a sanctuary for our weary bodies and weary minds, a place of holy communion with God and with one another. And from that place, I offer these words that were put out this week by our Unity headquarters in response to the events of the past week. In this moment of civil unrest, we call ourselves to God consciousness. We speak the word for harmony. We speak the word for order. We recognize no person, situation, or force greater than the power of God, the source of our ability to lead from a place of peace, with strength, wisdom, and courage right now. And so it is. So now let's join in our new winter affirmation. Please repeat after me. Living in spirit, I am guided by spirit.
I am guided by spirit.
And so it is. For our announcements, as always, we refer you for upcoming events and such to our weekly shout out. And you can make sure that you receive that by going onto our unityofmontereybay.org website and scrolling down until you find a place to insert your email address. That will get you on our weekly e-blast list so you can stay in touch with us and know all of the amazing things that are happening here at UMB. This is a reminder coming from Reverend Vicki that we, all current members who want to renew their membership for 2021, take a look in your shout out for instructions, but basically you need to email Vicki and let her know that you want to continue your active membership here at UMB. And this must be completed before Sunday, January 24th, which is the date of our annual Calling of the Circle meeting, which will be happening by Zoom this year. Okay, now is the time when we bless our children, and we are now including all teachers and all of those involved in education that are struggling to work with this new platform, and parents who are struggling to homeschool their children and help their children with distance learning, holding all of them in our hearts this morning, as well as the children in our lives, Vicky's brand new grandbaby, and all of the children around the world, as we open ourselves to that awe and wonder and joy that children call forth in us. Please join me in our heartfelt blessing. We love you, we bless you, we appreciate you just the way you are. And deepen our blissful interconnection with Spirit. So taking a collective deep breath in and letting it out with an audible sigh. Allowing all distractions to gently fade away as we invite the chime to call us into this sacred space within. We ring the chime 4 times to call in the 4 directions and to remind us of our interconnection with all of creation and with the sacred circle of life. As we feel it resonate through our very beings, we follow its call into this now present moment within. Continuing to focus on our breath, with each inhale, we open our hearts and minds. We envision our breath reaching every cell of our being. And with each exhale, we see all barriers and obstacles dissolving into the divine flow. And again, as we inhale, we expand the spaciousness within us. We move beyond the limitations and boundaries of our bodies. And as we exhale, we ground ourselves deep within Mother Earth and into our oneness with the universe. Finally, we breathe our awareness into the highest expression of love, light, joy, and peace we can imagine, as we experience a transforming wave of gratitude. And with a fullness of heart, we say yes to it all. Embracing, claiming, and knowing the divine Christ Spirit expressing in, through, and as us. And with a final exhale, we say, thank you, God. Now fully centered and transformed by the power of Spirit, we enter into our lesson and meditation time with today's daily word.
We read from today's Daily Word, shared with permission of Daily Word publisher of Daily Word. They can also be found at dailyword.com. And the word is release. I invite you to allow my words to be your words. All is well with my soul. No matter what is going on in the world around me, the state of my soul is always perfect harmony and poise. I recognize that my soul dwells in perfection, beyond time, in the infinite realm of God. I relax, knowing peace and comfort always are as near to me as my next breath. In the depths of my soul, all is well. As I meditate on this truth, I relax into the infinite presence of God. Everything in my world is expressing in perfect harmony, and my highest good is manifesting with ease and grace. I flow with that goodness, allowing it to permeate my feelings and consciousness. I relax into this blissful communion where I know perfect peace and become aware that all is well with my soul. And from the scriptures, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Exodus chapter 33, verse 14. In witness to the wisdom of the many paths to the sacred, we read from 3 sacred traditions this morning's topic, the cycles of life. From Taoism, Tao gives birth to one gives birth to two, the two give birth to three, the three gives birth to all universal things. All universal things shoulder the yin and embrace the yang. The yin and yang mingle and mix with each other to beget the harmony. From Judaism and Christianity, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 4. And from Buddhism, when we are mindful, deeply in touch with the present moment, our understanding of what is going on deepens, and we begin to be filled with acceptance, joy, peace, and love. From Thich Nhat Hanh.
Kay, were you at Woodstock? She looked like she was having a little bit of a flashback experience over there. Well, this morning I have the amazing honor to introduce our guest speaker for today, who is Molly Steele. And we didn't prepare an introduction, but I know that Molly has been for the last few years preparing herself, studying and such to become a minister in our sister denomination, CSL, Center for Spiritual Living, right?
Awakening. Center for Spiritual Awakening.
Is that what the whole denomination is called now?
It's long story.
Okay. At any rate, that's her background, and she has offered to give us our lesson today, and we are so blessed to have her. So take it away, Molly.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
In the middle of December, I was flipping channels, and I landed on Judy Collins singing "Turn, Turn, Turn," and it was like I heard it for the first time. And this talk kind of came to me, and I spoke with Vicki, and I said, "Vicki, I need to do a talk." And she said, "Okay," and so she scheduled me for today. By way of introduction, I'd like to take a few minutes and tell you how I came to be here by honoring my primary teachers. My father, Curtis Steele, started on a spiritual path with his second wife, my second mother, Nancy Porter Steele, when I was 11. They've been Buddhists for about 40 years. This photograph was used to illustrate an article in Shambhala Sun in 2009. I love Daddy's face. He's got a boyish smile and a twinkle in his eye, but I spent most of my life following in his footsteps with Nancy's support, and so this photo is appropriate for this talk. Daddy introduced me to Master Yap Soon Young, who's a very clear teacher of energy, Qigong, and esoteric Buddhist teachings. I discovered Dr. Bill Little at Pacific Coast Church, now Center for Spiritual Awakening, in the late 90s. The base is religious science, a cousin of unity. Dr. Bill draws together many ancient and modern teachings by looking for the commonalities instead of the differences. His PhD is in quantum physics, and he teaches metaphysics from that point of view. As soon as I finished my ministerial course requirements at CSA last December, God said, "Next," and I started attending Unity Monterey Bay here, which also teaches many paths to the sacred. Most of you know Vicki and Michelle. They're grounded, loving, no-nonsense women. For those of you who don't, Vicki teaches us how to walk the talk in the world, or as she would say, divine love in action. Michelle is a rising star in Unity, and she's steeped in metaphysical and progressive Christianity. Miranda McPherson of San Rafael offers what she describes as a feminine approach to non-dual awakening. And before coming to the States, she founded an interfaith seminary in the UK. She's a remarkable teacher and spiritual counselor. She has a great website and is full of resources, and her latest book is The Way of Grace. And last but certainly not least is my husband, my best friend, and my teacher, John Talon. He's the kindest man I ever known, and there are not enough words. So, a deep bow to all of you. So what the heck is going on? This is the classic yin-yang symbol. It represents balance and inherent harmony between active and passive, internal and external. But it's not supposed to be static. Balance involves constant adjustments. And I'm going to turn it on its side. You'll see in a minute. From within the light, a darkness appears, and from within the darkness, a light appears, and then it flips. The dark side is never all light, and the light side is never all dark. Now, in order for me to understand this, I needed to add the time, the element of time to it. And to do that visually, what I did is I rotated the top half, and to me that looks like a wave. So cycles simplified. Let me see if I can get this to work. There are periods of contraction, stillness below the surface, followed by a period of expansion with action above the surface and stillness below the surface. This is the pulse of life, of everything in existence. These are some pulses of our human body. You've got the pulse, the heartbeat, the breath, and digestion. These are cycles of the physical universe. And here we've got sound waves, light, the electromagnetic spectrum, and planetary movements. You can see that the physical universe is a lot more regular than life. There's a lot of influences on life. So although it seems linear, in order to understand this, we think of it as a cycle. This would be a 24-hour period starting at sunset, coming around to sunrise, and then ending at sunset. And within each day, you have, at night, we have active dreaming. We have tossing and turning. And during the day, we have resting. We have periods where we take a break. So it's never completely any one thing. There's always different dynamics going on. So let's zoom out from a day to a year. This is the example with the changes in hours of daylight. We start our autumnal equinox, and then it starts getting darker until the winter solstice. Here's our spring equinox, the summer solstice, and again back to the autumnal equinox. It happens every year, but how many times do people hear people saying, "I can't believe it's getting dark so early. I can't," that's, you know, it's like, duh. And the reason for that is, if you notice, 4 months of linear time, there's only a 17% change. 2 months of linear time, there's a 67% change. So for most of the time, we don't experience much, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa. And so we go from periods of contraction to periods of expansion. Oh, I'm sorry, back up a second. During periods of contraction, when we're heading toward periods of expansion, it feels like we're grinding uphill. It's like, oh my God, this is getting so hard. And then when you start getting toward the top, you know, it starts leveling off a little bit. Sorry, there was something funny in the room. It starts leveling off, you know, you start feeling springtime rising, the days are getting longer, and you start getting more energized. And then when we switch from periods of expansion down to periods of contraction, we don't really notice that things are getting shorter until all of a sudden we're dropping down a cliff, and it's like, whoa. So that's why, you know, we can get kind of unsettled about time. I'm thinking if we explain it and understand what's going on, it's a little bit easier to relate to. So a friend of mine, Edward O'Malley, he's a student of history and foreign affairs and social change. He talks about cycles in his book, American Renewal, that was published a couple of years ago. When time clearly appears to move in a linear fashion, with one day following the next and the months and years occurring in succession, there's also a rhythm to our lives that is cyclical. Ed uses the analogy of seasons to show the cyclical and predictable nature of social change in America. You can see from 1929 to 1945, we were in a crisis stage. And then the World War II ended, we entered a high stage. The assassination of JFK brought us into an awakening stage. I don't remember what triggered from 80 to 81, but everything started coming unraveling. And then in 2001 with 9/11, we entered a crisis stage that we've been in since. And we're just on the edge of entering the next high stage, 2020 to 2038. Here's what Edwards cycles look like when we use our curve to add the element of time. High, awakening, unraveling, and crisis. The entire cycle lasts about 70 to 80 years, and then it repeats. Now we're adding the generations to this. This was our greatest generation, and actually the seasons in which the current generations come of age. When you're starting to become politically aware, socially aware, that's when influences your life. We have spring, the silent generation. The summer the baby boomers came into coming of age during the assassination of JFK. Autumn, Generation X came of age. And then 9/11, the millennials started coming of age. about millennials. Because we all know, we're baby boomers here, most of us, and we know that, but I'd like to focus for a minute on the millennials. To put things in perspective, Pete Buttigieg is on the older end, Alexandria Orozco-Cortez is on the younger end. The significant events in their formative years, 9/11 and 20 years of war in the Middle East, the 2008 financial crisis, student loan debt exploding, income inequality exploding, affordable housing vanishing, homeownership is less likely than moving back in with parents, Katrina, Sandy, Harvey, the climate crisis exploding, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Parkland, and 227 more school shootings, the Me Too movement, repeated killings of unarmed people of color that they see on television, inherent bias being exposed again and again and again. And we aren't doing anything about most of this. Is there any reason they don't want to listen to us? Now this shows when the current generations come into leadership, and we can see that the millennials are coming into leadership now. I don't have children, I don't know many personally. I've heard people complain about them, but I think they're going to be okay. I came across this book. It was one of the books, I got it from the library, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really going to read it. And I kept trying to return it, and it kept ending up back in my car. And so finally I just sat down and read it. And here's what I learned. Individually, millennials are entitled. Collectively, they demand a social safety net. Individually, they're oversensitive to microaggression. Collectively, they're pushing for a cohesive vision of social justice. Individually, they're glued to their smartphones. Collectively, their intuitive use of social media gives them a fresh understanding of how to communicate and organize. Individually, they're naive and demanding. Collectively, they have idealism. They helped launch the rocket Obama and saw his promise fade when everyone put their hopes in one savior. But they were inspired by his example. A 2018 Pew Research Center survey found that nearly 60% of millennials say they're consistently or mostly liberal, while only 12% say they're consistently or mostly conservative. Millennial moms are the largest consumer group right now, and they're driving reform of corporations to focus on environmental impacts and social justice. They don't go to church, but they describe themselves as spiritual, and Harry Potter is their moral touchstone. Now let's zoom out to the next level. A few years ago, I heard people who study astrology start saying how 2020 is going to be a challenging year. Now, I appreciate astrology, but it's so suggestive that I try not to use it predictably. I can use it to understand something, but, words have power. And so when everybody started talking about the Great Conjunction, I decided to start studying at the universities of YouTube and Google. I wanted to highlight a few things I found very interesting. The first YouTube videos I watched were recorded about 4 years ago. Various people said there would be a lot of planetary action in 2020 that would bring about things such as restructuring of power, potential for tyranny, crimes, and corruption, declining use of coal and fossil fuels, huge advances in genetics and medicine, abundance and great wealth for some, shaken up in finances for other, and global supply interruptions. Who knew it would be about toilet paper? And if you had somebody told you what would happen in 2025, 4 years ago, would you have believed it? No. So I learned that the Grand Conjunction occurs about every 20 years, the same as the generational cycles we just looked at. And for the past 218 years, with one exception, it has occurred in Earth signs. For the next 139 years, it'll occur in air signs. And so what does this mean? These are the words that were repeated in various articles and videos. Earth signs, Earth signs, the description, hierarchical control, dominated by the old male, materialistic, industrialized, land, money, fossil fuels, external achievements. And then here's the Grand Conjunction, or the Great Conjunction, into air signs. Decentralization, fluidity, networks, teamwork, mass mobility connection, technological and ideological advances, especially air fuels, solar and wind, and a renaissance of scholarship and spirituality. And this will be with us until 2159. Kind of exciting. So unfortunately, this doesn't depict the age of Aquarius. As much as we like the words to the song, the age of Aquarius begins when the March equinox point moves out of the constellation Pisces and into the constellation Aquarius. The entire cycle lasts 25,800 years, divided into 12 constellations of the zodiac sign. Each zodiac sign's age is 2150 years and begins when the sun's position at the time of the spring equinox moves in front of a new zodiac constellation. So, when will that be? Well, there's no definitive answer because astrology is different than astronomy. Various interpretations throughout time give different answers. Most say sometime in the 20th century, which means we're already there, but there's no consensus on the year. Some say when the Mayan calendar ended on December 21st, 2012, and some places beginning in the 24th century, while others say it began as early as 1447. So pulling this all together, we've talked about different cycles. Let's say each one of these, each one of these cycles represents a year. And so we have 9 years total. This next circle represents the current 4-year administration, soon to be X. This next cycle represents the upcoming 4-year administration. This adds the seasons, the transition of the seasons from Ed O'Malley's talk. This one, the big yin-yang, and it's getting kind of messy here, but the big yin-yang I tried to add, it's going to be about this big. That's the period from 1802 when the Great Conjunction went into Earth signs to 2159. And so with all this coming together, is there any wonder that things are intense right now? So I fully realize that nobody can predict the future with any sort of accuracy. However, we get to imagine the future that we live into, and I prefer to live into a future of harmony instead of something worse. I read a quote, I can't find its source. Optimism is believing everything will work out. Hope is the belief that we will work everything out together. So I'm going to wrap up this section on cycles with the child's arrival. We have a couple of new grandbabies in the congregation. Birth is initiated when the baby says, I may die if I leave, but I can't take it in here anymore, and there's only one way out. And so that's when the birth process starts. I imagine, I haven't had kids, but I imagine that the moment of birth is one of those still points. There's a gap between the end of the mother's last scream and the baby's first. It's not that people hold their breath, there is no breath for that moment. Time just stops. And then there's a flurry of activity, a huge mess, and a great deal of pain. The baby just went from a warm, moist environment to a cold, dry one. The mother is exhausted and her body's misshapen. Both mother and child face an uphill climb. But from that moment, when time stopped, mother and father's lives are forever changed. They have never known a greater love. They will do anything for their child. I see a lot of sads in here shaking. And perhaps the Great Conjunction and a generational shift during the contentious election cycle, and oh, by the way, a pandemic and everything else, was another moment in time when a new era was born. The Buddhists use the symbol of the Dharma wheel to show the cyclical nature of life and explain the human conditions with what they call the Four Noble Truths. And I'm not going to read all of these. The good thing about streaming is you can rewatch and read if you want to. But life is suffering. And suffering in this word doesn't mean what we think it does. In the basic sense, it's simply wishing something were different than it was in the present or had been in the past. The cause of suffering is craving and our fundamental ignorance of the cycles of life. We do this because it's the nature of being human. So, is there anything we can do about it? The third and fourth noble truth offer an answer. The good news is our obscurations are temporary. It sounds familiar, this is. But this does not mean that we can ignore problems that we can solve. It also does not mean that we should always try to solve another person's problem. Imagine if you never taught your children to tie their shoes. But how can we know what to do? Well, the fourth noble truth offers an answer to that. The Buddhists call it the Eightfold Path that leads to the end of suffering. And each one of these spokes on the Dharma wheel represents one of those paths. These are summarized in 3 groups. By living ethically, practicing meditation, and developing wisdom, we can find freedom from ignorance. We can wake up. And if that sounds familiar, it is. So how do we apply all this information in our day-to-day lives? Well, first, we need to have the correct orientation. We look at a wheel in this orientation because it's the only way to see it. If we flip it, what we can see is that the wheel represents the manifest realm, everything in existence. But we can sometimes forget that there's a vertical axis, a shaft. I had written this talk, and I was trying to get some transition pieces, and I realized that the next part of this talk is organized by Unity's Statement of Faith, and I'll read it again because it's just so wonderful. And if you want to join with me, you can. There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God good, expressing always, as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. So this is my understanding of God beside me. It's a personal relationship, unique within each one of our experiences. Regardless of which form of spirituality you practice, which teachers you study with, whether there's a divine being or absolute void, and no matter how many people throughout time have walked the same path before, the experience of this relationship with the God beside you is completely and utterly individual. Now, many of us call this Mother, Father, God. We find comfort when we can develop a personal relationship with a divine being, historical or mythical or purely imaginary, who has ears to hear when we're crying for help, a voice to whisper to us, arms to hold us when we need it, and give us a little nudge every now and then when we need that too. It's in times like these when having a God beside me is especially helpful. You may be familiar with this passage from other contexts, but think about where we are today. Yea, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now, a staff is an axis connecting God and human, an integration of human and divine consciousness, or a magic wand. Here are some beings who figured this out. This is Isis and Moses, Pope Francis, and a wizard. It's a little cumbersome to carry a staff unless you've used one already for stability, but think about maybe carrying something that you can use as a touchstone or a talisman, or every now and then when you just need to remember this, just plant your staff and hold on. This next one is the infinite God beyond me. can sound incomplete because God doesn't stop at our skin, but there is a next slide coming, so don't worry. God's love starts as pure, unmanifest energy. The Buddhists would call that the void. It condenses into form to serve a particular purpose for a particular period of time, and when that purpose is fulfilled, God's love returns to the formless state. This process repeats infinitely. I call it the pulse of God. Now, the inner God being me is depicted in the sacred geometry form, the torus energy vortex. Each atom and everything on the planet and in the known universe is surrounded by its own energy field known as the torus. To give you some examples, this is an atom, and this is a galaxy. This is a hurricane, and this is hemoglobin. We've heard this before. I finally chased down the site. God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere. Now, this is how I imagine the torus flow to be depicted in a divine being such as Jesus. Not only do you have the torus flow, but you also have what's called a heavenly pillar connecting heaven and earth. And we initiate that torus flow ourselves. It's always kind of there, but we can enhance it. There's a lot of teachings that say lift your mind to heaven, but Master Yap explained to me that those teachings came to be in times when people generally worked very hard. They were typically not very educated, and they didn't do nearly as much thinking as we do today. He said the energy of our thinking mind is always shooting up. So to be in harmony, we need to allow the mind to descend. When the energy descends, it creates a vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum, so it's like a siphon. When you release and let down, it comes around and then enters from above. And we start that process. Christians would describe that as the Holy Spirit descending. You may have heard the term grounding, laying your burdens down. It's probably also the purpose of confessing your sins, so we can let go of the energy associated with having made a mistake. It may also be the practice of humility, getting low, why certain devotees humble themselves at their master's feet. If we want to bring peace into our world, we can initiate the flow pretty much anywhere we want in a million little ways. I'll talk about more of meditation and prayer later. But I'd like to say, dropping the knife of judgment. Judgment is a double-edged sword that cuts you. It cuts off any possibility of moving beyond conflict. Now, as far as recreational complaining, we say we believe in the power of our words, so let's stop creating our future with recreational complaining. We got the soon-to-be ex-president because it's all everybody wanted to talk about. Experiment with what happens when you stop giving him your precious life energy. Stephen Colbert has stopped using his videos, and when he puts his name, it's T followed by 4 asterisks. For some, this will be like ending an addiction, but the first step is acknowledging you have a problem. So now let's look at how this appears in the world. My experience of God's love doesn't stop at my skin. If you're around someone who's having a bad day, instead of responding in kind, making things worse for you and for them, try just grounding yourself and offering a prayer that they may find peace. We can depend on the wordless human connection, and people who believe in remote prayer know you don't have to be in physical proximity to bring this about. This is the Buddhist metta prayer. I often say it when watching the news. That's another name for the world's prayer request list. May all beings dwell in the heart. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be healed. May all beings know their wholeness. May all beings be happy and at peace. And you can add afterwards, including you. You could also add including me. Now, you may not think that one small person can make a difference in a vast world with so many current problems. They're complex, and if we think we're alone, we may be right. But God has many gifts for us. One is called the butterfly effect, also known as chaos theory. Chaos theory. Small things can have nonlinear impacts on a complex system. Another gift is called the ripple effect. You never really know where the results of your action will end up. And a third, this is my definition of turbulent flow. And I think this is the energy you can sense when you go into holy places where people have been praying. It's all the subtle energy you pick up on when you go into a room and people have been loving or angry, excited or depressed. You can kind of feel it. And I think it's because of this flow of energy. So what is mine to do? Divine love in action. Some of us are best living and working on the edge most of the time, going fast. Some of us are better offering encouragement and telling the stories. And some of us are more effective in the center, providing support and perspective. At the chaplain Zoom meeting on Thursday, of course, we talked about the January 6th insurrection. I was working on this talk. I was at my 60,000 feet level, and I was struck by the fact that the democracy with a small d and the Democrats with a big D won on the same day, which also happened to be the 12th day of Christmas, the Epiphany, when the Magi arrived. Others in our group were horrified by the photographs, and they were still processing through emotions. And this highlights the value of spiritual community. We each bring our gifts, but we're better together. Now, Sangha means spiritual community. Senator Klobuchar said about that Tuesday night that when the Senate chamber was evacuated, all of the senators and their staffs went into the same room. They usually break into party blocks, but they were all in the same room together. She said there were some very sincere and candid and heartfelt conversations about how to get past this. There's a famous Taoist story. When an old farmer stallion wins a prize at a country show, his neighbor calls around to congratulate him, but the old farmer says, "Who knows what's good and what's bad?" The next day, some thieves come and steal his animal, his valuable horse. His neighbor comes to commiserate, but the old man again says, "Who knows what's good and what's bad?" A few days later, the stallion escapes from the thieves and comes home with a herd of mares. The neighbor calls to share the farmer's joy, but the farmer said, "Who knows what's good and what's bad?" The following day, while trying to break one of the mares, the farmer's son is thrown from the horse and breaks his leg. The neighbor calls to share the farmer's sorrow, but the old man's attitude remains as it was before. The following week, the army passes by and conscripts all the able-bodied men. They don't take the son because he can't walk. The neighbor thinks to himself, "Who knows what's good and what's bad?" and realizes he's learned a lesson from a Taoist sage. So we've all been shaken by free speech crossing the line. What can we as individuals do about it? We tend to gravitate toward work in the outer world because it feels like at least we're doing something. But hopefully this talk shows why it's more important to actually do work in the inner world. That's where we have the most power, because it's not our power. We're tapping into the divine power. Now, Jesus has asked us to love our enemies. That can be really hard to understand how to do that. Especially with people who we saw desecrating democracy. But if we want to heal the rift in our society, it's up to those of us with open minds and big hearts to go first. In the Buddhist tradition, it may help us understand how to love when we don't like somebody. Compassion and love are seen as two aspects of the same thing. Compassion is the wish for another person to be free from suffering. Love is wanting them to have happiness. If we can't get all the way to love right now, maybe we can start with gratitude. Consider the possibility that if you were born into the same family, the same community, with the same personality structure, exposed to the same people, the same life experience and spiritual beliefs, you might have acted as they did. And also consider the possibility that if they were born into your family with your personality traits, your life experiences, your community, your sources of information, your spirituality, they might have acted as you did. Now let's go back to the words that describe the past 100 years and the next 200 years. Every generation stands on the shoulders of its previous one, and every civilization is born on the shoulders of what went before. While we're trying to learn how to walk our talk in the world, I'd like to suggest figuring out how you can support the millennials who are coming into leadership in government, private sector, and society. They're going to have to do much of the heavy lifting as we begin this new era. The big events of their formative years have given them the motivation, but like a birth, there's a lot of pain and a huge mess to clean up. Speaking as a baby boomer, this era is not our child, it's our grandchild. We need to respect the decisions of the parents on how to raise this new era. They aren't interested in following in our footsteps, but we should allow them to stand on our shoulders. At the very least, we can do our best not to impede their progress. And let's stop criticizing them for building and using the remarkable tools we will all need in this new era. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. So bringing your faith into the world, you can trust that the teachings are true. There are subtle realms beyond our ability to perceive. Faith is belief in things one cannot see. Prayer is an act of faith. If prayer is the out-breath, meditation is the in-breath. To stay in balance, we meditate, then pray. Now this shows the cycle of meditation. And a lot of people say they can't meditate. So you start by focusing on a thing. The next slide has some things. Second thing is we get distracted by thought. Third, you realize you're distracted. Now this is the point of meditation. This is awareness. When we see what our mind is doing, we can choose. And so don't let your mind tell you you can't meditate. You just notice and then return your focus to the thing. Ultimately, the mind relaxes and forgets to be distracted for a little while. And then it gets distracted again. It's an ongoing process. Now, silent meditation is the classic beginning point for most traditional Eastern teachings taught mostly by men to men in monasteries. And progressive teachers realize it's very difficult for modern minds to be still. So fortunately, there's a lot of other ways to get started. And I'm not going to read everything, but you can see there's a wide variety. You're looking for something that you want to do. It's hard enough, so start with something you like. Something you're willing to commit time to on a regular basis. Some say daily, I say whenever, whatever feels right for you. Don't let somebody else's rules about this keep you from getting started. Now, I'd like to explain one of them. I call it the Thich Nhat Hanh approach, which is basically do what you're doing while you're doing it with awareness of what you're doing while you're doing it. Simple, but not easy. So I'm pleased to offer Zoom meditations weekly on Mondays from 7 to 8. There's more information in the shout out. And if you don't receive that, you can sign up by going to unityofmonterey.org and receive the newsletter. Beginning in February, I'm going to start more of a formal process. The months are each going to have themes. We'll try some of these. first Monday of the month is going to be a lot of information. The middle Mondays will be less information, more meditating, and the final Monday of the month will offer the longest meditation. So now, I am pleased and proud to ask my husband John Talon to lead us in a chant we learned from Miranda McPherson. She's a classically trained singer with a beautiful voice. Her current CD is called The Heart of Being, and her new CD is coming out this spring. I'd also like to show you the cover of her book, The Way of Grace, The Transforming Power of Ego Relaxation. So settle in, get comfortable. After we chant, we'll go directly into our moment of silence. Thank you very much.
All right. I'm going to do a little chant now, and this is from Psalms, and I'm going to be accompanied by this instrument here. It's called the Shruti box. And the Shruti box is a reed instrument that has its origins in the East, in China and in India, and it's used as a tonic or a root note to accompany instruments or to accompany the voice. And it helps us to center, and it helps us to stay in tune with each other when we sing or chant. So it has reeds similar to an accordion or a harmonica, and has these stops that you open depending on what notes you want to play on that. So just listen to this phrase that I'm going to chant a few times, and then if you want to join in, you can hum behind your mask, or if you're at home, sing out loud. There's only one line to this. It's very simple, and it's "Be still and know that I am God." So just center yourself on the sound, and then we'll do the chant. Okay. Be still and know that I am God. 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 season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to reap, a time to sow, a time to live, a time for hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late.
Wow, what a day. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, John. Unity of Monterey Bay is the collective consciousness and commitment of all of us who give of our time, treasure, and talent in order to sustain the spiritual community that is dedicated to transforming lives. We know that prosperity is a state of mind that finds blessings in every situation and abundance in joyous generosity. We transform all appearance of fear or lack into faith-filled peace of mind by shifting our attention to thoughts of gratitude for the abundance of God's good in our lives. And with our hearts and minds overflowing with gratitude, we breathe into the divine flow of God's good, trusting that we are enough, that we have enough, and that there always is enough to both have and to share. And again, we are grateful to all of you for your online giving through our website at unityofmontereybay.org and through your mailed-in offerings, including those who have set up automatic giving with your banking institutions. We are truly blessed. And now, from this place of faith and gratitude, I invite you to join me in mindful intention in joining in our offertory blessing. I am an open channel for God's infinite good. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies everything I give and everything I receive. I am both blessed and a blessing. Thank you, God.
So I'd like to thank a number of the musicians that whose music we used today: Daniel Maymod, Galt McDermott, James Rado, is that right? Jerome Ragney, and of course Pete Seeger, as well as our awesome music team. And I especially want to thank Molly for giving us an amazing lesson today. Thank you. Let's clap, because we didn't clap. Thank you, Molly. And thank you, John, for sharing your instrument and your music with us. It was quite a blessing today. Thank you so much. to a close this morning, I also just want to thank you for bearing with us as we had some technical difficulties at the beginning, but we hope you're still with us and we appreciate your patience. And we are so grateful that you've chosen to spend this past hour, almost hour and a half with us this morning, and we hope we've made you feel at home at our Unity of Monterey Bay community. And most importantly, we want you to know truly that wherever you are on your spiritual path, you are welcome here. You can submit prayer requests via our website, and our chaplains will hold those prayers for you. And Reverend Vicki and myself are available by email, and you can always contact Silent Unity for prayer requests. We will be having our Zoom coffee hour after the meeting beginning at 11:15. So before we make our final closing circle for our prayer of protection and our peace song, I'd just like to offer this blessing for you for this coming week. May you give yourself time to rest, to grieve, and to heal. May you nourish your body with healthy food, good music, and laughter. May you find a place of peace within yourself. May you see God's goodness everywhere you look, and may you know the depth of God's love. Will you please join me in our prayer for protection? The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Many blessings to you and have an awesome week.